Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now, Theresa May arrived in Paris a short time ago, where she's just been holding talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Matt Fry is inside the Elysee Palace grounds. Matt.
Indeed, John, and in the courtyard of the Elysee Palace, and had you been here just a few minutes ago, you would have heard the crunching gravel under the wheels of the Prime Minister and the President's cars as they were speeding away from here after their talks and a press conference to attend the England-France friendly match in the Stade de France. But of course, when Theresa May planned this visit a few weeks ago, she expected to come here all triumphant as the freshly re-minted, re-elected Prime Minister of Great Britain. Hasn't quite turned out like that. That's changed the dynamic between the two somewhat. More on that in a minute. But I started my day in Strasbourg this morning at the seat of the European Parliament, where I spoke to the key negotiator of the European Parliament when it comes to matters Brexit, a man who you know called Guy Verhofstadt. Listen. You're getting impatient.
It's normal, I think. So, and I think this, I become impatient not for myself, but for because the uncertainty around for the citizens is continuing, and also for our businesses.
So when you heard of the election result on Friday morning, what was your response?
Yeah, my reaction to this is okay. I wait for a new position of the UK. Will the position of the UK government be the same as in the letter of the 29th of March?
No single market, no customs union.
No customs union, no European Court of Justice, so the hard Brexit. Or will the UK government now take into account also the result of this election? Because I think, I'm very humble on this, but I think that a hard Brexit was not approved in this election.
The British position next Monday, as the opening salvo of negotiations, is an undiluted guarantee of the rights of EU citizens in the UK. Would you reward such a gesture by perhaps allowing some movement on the single market and allowing the Brits to opt into the single market without adopting the full freedom of movement?
Absolutely not. We cannot mix it. The withdrawal agreement will be three clear items. It will be the citizens' rights, EU citizens and UK nationals, and there has to be reciprocity, is that we have to be the most generous as possible for both, for the UK nationals.
And guaranteeing those rights is essential.
That is essential.
But is there any possibility that Britain can get into the single market, as many people in the UK want, and you could argue that they've just voted for a softer version of Brexit, which involves the single market, without having to accept the freedom of movement of people?
No, then you know the answer already.
Can't happen.
That can happen, because single market is linked to the four freedoms, also the freedom of movement of people.
Okay, and Britain in a customs union is something that you would welcome?
Parliament has said we welcome the single market option, a Norwegian style relationship. We are in favor of customs union, but then naturally trade policy will still be negotiated on the European level. So the problem is not what is the best solution. Everybody knows that the best solution is, for example, single market of customs union. The problem is that from the Tory side, they have to accept that it is linked to the four freedoms.
Are you getting fed up with the Tory party squabbles over Europe? Because it's delaying so many projects within the EU.
We are paralyzed by this, what I still see as an internal catfight in the Tory party, and it's still poisoning, and we have to end this. I think, not for us, because we are politicians, we can live with it, but ordinary citizens cannot live with it. UK nationals living on the continent cannot live with it. EU citizens living in Britain cannot live with it, and certainly not our businesses can live with it.
So you don't want to be delayed by Brexit unnecessarily?
No, but what we see since Brexit is a sort of a new momentum for Europe. What we feel is everybody has thought after Brexit there will be a domino effect. Other countries will follow. We shall see an exit and a Dexit and a Frexit. And what is happening is exactly the opposite.
So we've done you a favour.
So more and more people...
We've done you a favour.
Well, Also in Britain you see it. I think that people are very much aware of the necessity to keep a European Union together, not because it's the European Union, no, because it's the only way to defend our interest in this new world order that is being created. And a new world order with China, with India and with Trump.
So we've left Strasbourg, the seat of the European Parliament, and we're on our way to Europe's newly emboldened capital, Paris, where tonight Theresa May and Emmanuel Macron will meet. Arguably, Europe's weakest politician meets Europe's most powerful politician. That'll be interesting. President Macron came to power promising more Europe, not less. And in the Assembly, he will have the MPs to make it happen. It's not just the facade that's being rebuilt here. Inside, the president's brand new party, just over a year old, will occupy at least 72% of the seats, thanks to a low turnout and the spectacular collapse of the old ruling parties. France has burst out of its malaise. Britain has just done the opposite. Well, not surprisingly, President Macron looked very pleased tonight. I mean, he's really at the pinnacle of his power and only started that ascent just over a year ago. It's quite an extraordinary rise, just as much as Theresa May has had the opposite experience in a much briefer frame of time, and something that she's still obviously reeling from. Now, the two of them talked about cybersecurity and terrorism. There was a lot of Theresa this and Emmanuel that, but there's no doubt that the power relationship between these two has changed fundamentally in recent days as a result of politics. And of course, wherever Theresa May goes at the moment, domestic politics very much follows in her train. So I had the opportunity to ask this question in the press conference in the gardens of the Elysee Palace just a few minutes ago. Listen. Prime Minister, you talk about a unity of purpose, but the former Prime Minister, your former party leader, John Major, has effectively accused you today of endangering peace in Northern Ireland by clinging to power with a coalition deal with the DUP. What is your response to that? And if I may, Monsieur le Président, you said an exit is an exit, but the German finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, said today that if Britain changed its mind for some reason, the door would be open to remain in the EU. Do you agree with him?
Shall I take the first? On the first point that you raised, Matt, we as a government remain absolutely steadfast in our commitment to the Belfast Agreement and the subsequent agreements, and we continue to work with all the parties in Northern Ireland and with the Government of the Republic of Ireland in ensuring that we can continue to put in place those measures necessary to fulfil those agreements. As you'll be aware, there are discussions now continuing to take place on the formation of the Northern Ireland Executive and our intent on enabling the parties to work together to ensure we can see that executive being reformed and a devolved administration continuing in Northern Ireland is absolute. What we're doing in relation to the talks that we're holding, the productive talks we're holding with the Democratic Unionist Party, is ensuring that it is possible to, with their support, give the stability to the UK government that I think is necessary at this time. We stand at a critical time with those Brexit negotiations starting only next week. I think that stability is important. We have worked as a party with the DUP before, and those are productive talks. The intent is to ensure that we have the stability of government in the national interest.
She didn't really answer my question directly, but at these things you don't get the opportunity for a follow-up. What was interesting about Monsieur Macron is that he said that, yes, in theory the door would be open if the EU changed its mind to stay in the European Union. However, he said, once you start the process of leaving, it's very difficult to wind that back. I suspect that President Macron would actually be quite keen to see Britain leave. Why? Because he wants a bit of that business, especially financial business that's in London at the moment, here in Paris. And also, most importantly, he's trying to reboot Project Europe. He wants to get going with the Germans. And the Brits in the past have always cramped Germany and France's style, and he wants to see an end to that. And Brexit has done him that favour. Over to you, John.
Matt Fry in Paris. Now, back here in Westminster, with political times as fast-moving as these were, where else to turn but satire? So joining me now is Eline van der Velden, a comedian from the Netherlands, and Sean Collins, a comedian from Canada. Eline, we've had a little bit of a job really finding this at all funny. It's all really been rather sad. But we did at least get mess last night. Mrs. May accepted that she had made a mess. And she's going to clear it up.
Yeah, it is pretty messy. I mean, welcome to European politics. A coalition, that's exactly what we do back in Europe, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how she manages.
Do the Dutch have a word for Brexit?
Yeah, Brexit.
Oh dear.
We like to do Brexit.
I see. Is it a swear word or that's actual? No. Thank goodness for that. Sean, what about Canada? I mean, any sense of how it feels in Canada?
I know
Do
how
they
it feels.
care?
I think they have enough to worry about with Trump and American politics, but it's funny when people say to me, do you think it's going to be tough to negotiate with the EU right now? Well, let's think about that. Imagine being married to someone for 43 years, divorcing them, and then going back and trying to sleep with them. It's going to be a little bit of a difficult ride.
That good.
Probably going to have to work out, maybe put
A
on
lot of us
clean
think it
shirt.
might be a lot worse than that. But so how does it feel to the Dutch? I mean, after all, you're a Dutch comedian living in this country.
Yes.
Do you want to go home?
I mean, I have thought about it. You know, all the Dutch people back home are like, what are they doing, this Brexit thing, you know? We haven't had a war since 1945. But yeah, no, the main thing is I thought Nick Clegg would stick around, and now he's gone. And he was sort of the best Prime Minister Britain ever had. And it's very sad because he did all the things that my British boyfriend wouldn't do, like learn languages and charm Europe.
Well, you didn't have to learn any languages, but I mean, are you going to go home?
I'm staying. My wife's English and my children are English, and you know what? There is no better way or place to find comedy than living here.
But do you look at us as rather odd people? I mean, do you want to do some trade with us? Because we're very keen to trade with you. And could we have Trudeau? Would that be all right?
Everybody wants Trudeau, yeah. I'm sure he'll be jogging by here any moment doing a selfie. So.
And you guys have the loony raving monster party.
Yes, we got the well, and Buckethead.
Oh, Lord Buckethead and Elmo.
Lord Buckethead, I mean, did a charming job.
We don't
on
get
the night.
those in Holland.
Don't you?
No.
You're not a very funny country, then.
No.
Because we are really quite odd.
Yeah.
There was also a Mrs. Fishfinger.
Yes, Fishfinger upstage as well.
We did think of getting them out here tonight, but they don't talk, unfortunately.
Do they not?
No,
Lord
no.
Buckethead talks.
Does he?
A little bit.
Have you interviewed him?
Not yet, no.
Have you ever been inside a Buckethead? I mean...
It can't be very comfortable.
It can't be.
It must be suffocating.
So, when you have to try and explain this to a Canadian audience, where would you begin? I mean, would you start in the Stone Age?
I probably wouldn't, because I'd want to keep them. So that's part of the reason why. I mean, unless it's ice hockey or something to do with Trump, it doesn't really concern them right now.
But I'm sure that outside Europe we'll start to play ice hockey in a big way. It's Europe's fault that we don't play ice hockey. You know that.
You've got some good teams.
Play field hockey.
Field hockey?
That's not hockey.
It is in Holland.
That's... Thank you both very warmly indeed.
Thank you very much.
Well, Hilary Benn is the former chair of the Brexit Select Committee, is seeking re-election to that position. And we can talk to him about the whole gamut of issues that are coming up in the Brexit debate. And I'm assuming you would rather have a shadow cabinet position than be chair of the Select Committee if a shadow cabinet position was offered to you.
Well, shadow cabinet positions are a matter for Jeremy, but I will, assuming that Labour is given the opportunity once again to chair the Select Committee, put myself forward for election by the House of Commons, because I think there's a really important job of work that needs to be done, particularly in the circumstances, the shambles we now find ourselves
Well, I was going to
in.
say, you've used the word shambles. Do you think it is odd that there's been a sort of ministerial changing of the guard at the Brexit department a week before, 6 days before negotiations?
I think it's absolutely astonishing, because those ministers have been working very hard, talking to lots of people, getting their head round all of the issues. The more you look, the more you realise there is to negotiate. And less than a week before the negotiations begin, half the team disappear, 2 new people arrive, they've got to read up at high speed. And I should think the European negotiators will think, what on earth are we dealing with here? And this is really bad for Britain, because what the election result has shown very clearly is the idea of leaving the EU with no deal is now dead and buried. And the big question is whether Theresa May now understands that it is definitely Parliament that is going to decide the shape of the Brexit.
Right, so to be clear, though, we've had a white paper which set out the UK government objectives. Are you saying that is dead, or is that still alive? Does that represent the objectives? I can see the bit about no deal is better than a bad deal.
But I think it's very important because only a couple of days ago, David Davis was still talking about being prepared to leave with no deal. Now, that would be catastrophic, as we showed when he appeared before the Select Committee, and he had to explain to us what the consequences of that would be. But look, I think in order to get effective scrutiny, the government's had to be pushed and prodded all the way to accept Parliament's role. I'd like to see the Select Committee having a stronger role in its work. Being able to receive regular reports from ministers, to call debates in Parliament, to make it explicit that the committee is overseeing the negotiations on behalf of Parliament and not just the work of the Brexit Committee, of the department.
But that sounds very modest, because a lot of people, including, we understand, David Cameron in Poland this evening, are saying it might be a good idea to bring more parties and more people into this and to try and build a kind of a bigger parliamentary consensus around what kind of Brexit we should have. William Hague this morning. Now, would that be your committee, or would that be a bigger thing? Would that be some kind of commission, or would it be something?
There's a range of things that could be done. You could bring in business, unions and others in kind of recreation of NEDI that existed in the 60s and 70s to consult on the process. You can't have that. If it's too many people, you can't really expect them to be involved in the nitty-gritty. The point that I'm making is I think there's a number of different options, but in the end, Parliament has a committee whose job it is going to be to oversee that, but I also think it's going to have to lead to changes in policy. The negotiations with the DUP are taking place. One of the things the DUP is very clear about, as in all the parties in Northern Ireland, don't want to see a return to a hard border and customs. Now, the government is taking a terrible risk, saying we want to be out of the customs union but sort of in. That isn't going to work. One step they could take is now to revisit that decision and say, if you want to guarantee for British business tariff and barrier-free trade, which is what the government says it wants, and you want to avoid the problems in Northern Ireland, then we should stay in the customs union.
Stay in the customs union. Forgo, by the way, with that, forgo the right to sign new trade deals independently with the US and India.
Well, that is true, but the US is already, as you know, Evan, our largest single trading market. Our trading goods with China has quadrupled over the last decade.
Key question. Staying in the customs union. When we have all these people saying we want a softer Brexit, vaguely expressed with no further clarification, is that what it comes down to? Do you think, when we hear people say softer Brexit, is the debate inside the customs union or not? Is that what it is?
Well, I think that's the first and clearly sensible step to take. I don't understand why the government didn't do that in the first place. The second issue will be what kind of access we have to the single market. But thirdly, cooperation on things like foreign policy, defence, security, the fight against terrorism. We've fought an election with 2 terrorist outrages here in the United Kingdom, and that continued cooperation is essential to our security as we leave the European Union.
Look, I need to talk to you about Jeremy Corbyn. He's had a much better electoral success than you predicted and most of your colleagues on the Labour backbenches predicted. I'm sort of interested in where you are at the moment, because obviously you thought he wouldn't do very well electorally, but you also didn't think he was very good. And I just wonder whether you still don't think he's very good. I mean, obviously you will have had to review your position on whether he's kind of can get the votes in, but have you changed your mind about him?
Well, I think he fought a brilliant campaign which enthused a lot of people with a message of hope over the politics of fear, which is really what the Tories ran in the course of the campaign. And look, there was a very cheerful meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party this evening, in marked contrast to the last meeting before we left for the election, because lots of people, me included, the polls, you probably, got it wrong about Jeremy's capacity to do that. And that is a great achievement. Now, the task we have is to build on that, because we need to broaden further our support.
His qualities as leader, I suppose, I mean, those haven't changed, have they? I mean, his appeal has changed, but or you've changed your view of that, I would imagine. Well, but what about his qualities as a leader?
Well, I think the qualities he demonstrated during the campaign, in the face of a lot of attacks, a very negative campaign from the Conservatives, a pretty hard time at the hands of the press, and Jeremy didn't rise to any of that. He didn't respond. He inspired people. He brought young people and others who hadn't voted before out, and we've got a lot of additional Labour MPs, and it's a fantastic foundation to build on for the next election, which could come very soon indeed.
Hilary Benn, thank you very much indeed.
I've been